just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
Don't get on me. I'm a victim of circumstances. Catch the things by slave name. I'm no longer a slave. I took my step back because I am a Muslim. And we fought in all the wars. And we still fight now. And still a nigga.
50 years ago, we were small children in the neighborhood. It was a very hospitable, warm place. Back in those days, it was peace and quiet in our neighborhood. Kind and people and gentle people. Everybody looked out for one another. I had two of the greatest parents that ever walked this planet. They taught us right from the get-go, don't hate people, love all people, treat all people decent. My dad was very fiery, very articulate, cocky. I found boxing at 10 years old. My brother found boxing at 12 years old. Muhammad was always training in the gym, and first in the gym, last to leave. Very dedicated. He would say, Rudy, let's go to the gym. From the time when Muhammad first discovered boxing, he always predicted he would be a world champion. He would go in the neighborhood and say, I'm gonna be the greatest boxer ever lived. Kids would say, oh, Cassius Clay, you ain't gonna do nothing. He said, I'm gonna be great. One day you're gonna see I'm gonna be great.
Who's the heavyweight champion of the world? I am the king of the world. I'm like a butterfly. I don't want to brag or nothing, but I'm bigger than boxing.
Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
Don't get on me. I'm a victim of circumstances. Catch the things by slave name. I'm no longer a slave. I took my step back because I am a Muslim. And we fought in all the wars. And we still fight now. And still a nigga. One more time. Who's the champ of the world? I am the king of the world.
Hold it.
I'm pretty.
Hold it, you're not that pretty.
I'm a bad man.
He was a man of the people who was comfortable with all people.
He had this quality where you immediately thought that you knew him and he was part of you.
He could get up and say the most provocative thing and then sit around and hug babies and walk through the poorest areas.
Yes, I'm awful serious.
Give me a nice serious look.
You can't compare anybody to Muhammad. Forget it. It's an injustice when you try to say this guy was like Muhammad.
What are you gonna do if you lose a fight?
Leave the country because I talk too much to come back.
Ali in the 60s became a figure that transcended boxing, transcended sports, transcended America.
Why am I going to go to Vietnam? No Viet Cong ever called me a nigger.
He was just an example of black manhood at a time when we had to do a lot of stooping.
My goal was to buck the establishment and be just what they didn't want me to be, what we call a bad nigger.
It would be tragic to just remember Ali as a fighter.
He was from Kentucky, sounded like a Kentucky kid. He remained that, I think. No matter what other mutations he went into, he was always a spokesperson for that boy from Kentucky.
There were two Louisvilles. There was your white Louisville and there was
was a black Louisville.
Movie theaters were segregated. Ali knew that. Cassius Clay Jr. knew that. The schooling was entirely segregated. The first white people that he dealt with were in the ring.
Segregation is a very bitter pill to swallow. You are limited what your options are. You're limited where you can go. You're limited by your color. So Cassius Clay then grew up with all of that.
His father was a very proud man. His father was also very suspicious of white people, thought that they had actually held him back. So Ali got those two things from his father, that arrogant sense that I can do anything, and yet on the other hand, mistrust of whites.
I don't think that Ali was against any race of people, white, black, or polka dot. I just think that he didn't want you to deny him because he was black.
There was no denying the young Cassius Clay, no denying the ambition, the talent, the pride. There was always inner strength beneath the beauty, conviction behind the words. The poetry of his motion and mind were the products of God-given potential, harnessed by hard work. He took up boxing at age 12 and forged an extraordinary amateur career which brought him several Golden Glove and national AAU titles, all before his 18th birthday. And as the number of victories rose, so did the volume, the clarity, and the confidence of his voice.
A lot of times I would have customers, and Muhammad would be in the waiting room sparring, you know, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that.
Do I just sound like I'm quiet to you? As loud as I'm hollering, you call me quiet?
And the guy said, he talks all the time. You always talking about what you going to do.
I'm hollering loud because I can back up every word.
I said, look, leave him alone, please. Don't tell him he talks too much. He doesn't talk enough.
And I want everybody out there on TV to know it. I am the greatest.
And that confidence, I can, I will, and I am. You know, you don't hear people talking like that.
I just think that was just the way he was as a person.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cassius Marcellus Clay. He's young, he's handsome, they know it.
I'll never forget one night, I said, that kid's got a lot of ability, but he talks so much that he'll never be anything. Well, you know, I missed that by a mile.
It's something that he was born with. And it's something that as he grew older and became more confident, he developed and he nurtured to become the singular voice that he turned out to be, the Louisville Lip.
But it was never merely lip service. Real wit and insight flowed out of the kid from Louisville, the most popular athlete among the Olympians to compete at the 1960 Games in Rome. He won the light heavyweight competition and then returned to the States with a gold medal around his neck, a wide smile on his face, and a world title in his sights.
Well, my resolutions are to become the youngest heavyweight champion in history. That's nothing new to my fans. Well, I predicted I'd be the heavyweight champion by the time I'm 21. I'm young, I'm handsome, I'm fast, I'm pretty, and can't possibly be beaten.
It's that confidence. It's the confidence. He took it to another level.
A lot of people went to fights to see him get whipped.
I'm as confident as I say, and I'm better than I say I am. I'm gunning for Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston. And if they get in my way, I will annihilate them also.
I'm going to knock you out in this round. Well, I'm going to knock you out in that round. You can't hit me. Come on, man. I'm going to stand right in front of you and I'm going to whoop you. And he did it. I have 180 amateur fights, 22 professional fights, and I'm pretty as a girl.
This was a black man saying this to a largely white audience. That was revolutionary then. Now it doesn't mean anything, but back then it was jaw-dropping to hear an athlete talk like that.
He was building up this persona. Yeah, it was a gimmick, and he understood that he had to sell tickets. But he wanted to be different than any champion that ever lived.
I'm a poet, I'm a prophet, I'm the resurrector, I'm the savior of the boxing world. If it wasn't for me, the game would be dead.
In each man's life, I think in boxing, you get two certain individuals that really make music together. And to make music together is to bring the best out of a fighter. Now, him and I have jived together from the first day we met.
This kid was a very special kid. This kid used to hop behind buses to get to the gym. Gym was his stage. First guy in the gym, last guy to leave. I made him feel he did everything.
Don't
I wouldn't give a direct thing. You do it. He wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? He'd reject that. We wouldn't have been together 2 days. I wasn't attracted, I'll be honest with you. In fact, the kid told me one time, he says, how come you never approach me? He was too jumping around, too flighty, pulling, jerking. That got better as we went along.
Nobody ever trained Muhammad Ali. Once he left the Fifth Street gym, he trained himself. He decided how many rounds he was going to box. He decided what he was going to do. Angelo, Muhammad didn't pay much attention to him. Muhammad knew what he wanted to do.
He wanted to be pretty. He wanted to be flashy. Joe Louis, Sonny Liston, they were called face fighters. Face fighters just come to you. They just followed you. They followed bang, bang, bang. Ali says, no, I'm going to hit you and you're not going to hit me back.
It's like a dance. It's like poetry. And yet, it's quite violent.
Genius can't be taught. Inspired, improvisational, unique. Ali's boxing was an abstract notion of the sweet science come to life. But his gifts weren't only limited to the lightness in his feet, the lightning speed in his hands, or the radar-like reflexes that kept him out of harm's way. He was also an artist at self-promotion and at playing the press for his own purposes.
Before Muhammad, fighters didn't talk. Muhammad was the first guy that talked. You talked to the superstar. I made my guy talk from the beginning.
He was the greatest interview in the world. You couldn't come away with a bad story.
What do you have to say? You didn't even shake my hand. What are you going to do about that? Now you must fall.
There were very few interviews. There were monologues.
Well, all these big mouth people here in Miami talking about I talk too much and this one's gonna whoop me. Well, I want all of them to be there and I'm gonna shut up all of his mouth.
He was always trying to help the promotion. Nobody today gets it. Ali got it. I remember coming to him before the Buster Mathis fight in the Astrodome. And Buster was really so in awe of Ali, and anything Ali said, Buster would laugh. So I said, Champ, we really got to come up with something. This is just not selling. We're in the Astrodome. And his eyes got big and bright. I got it. I got it. We'll make front page headlines around the world. I said, what is it? I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to hear what he was going to tell me. He said, you could have me kidnapped.
The greatest came to perfect the greatest show on earth. It was pure theater, a performance, but not entirely a put-on. He was, after all, just being himself, the part of him at least that loved to act the fool, have fun, and get laughs. And it was never more apparent than in the lead-up to his very first title bout with Sonny Liston, when the defending champion seriously questioned the young challenger's sanity.
He went to new theatrical heights at that press conference. He's waving his arm like this, and he's saying, you can't beat me. You know you can't beat me.
You tell this to your camera, your TV man, your radio man, and you right there in the whole world. If somebody wants to whoop me, I'll kick his feet in the rain. I'm bad. I'm bad. Man, I ain't scared. I'll come to your house at 2 o'clock in the morning looking for you. I don't get hit. Like, I don't get hit. I'm so pretty.
Everything is calculated. Every single thing is calculated.
He expanded the whole world of boxing. I think he single-handedly, brought boxing into your living room.
That's when I knew he was superstar. Because when he would turn the camera on, the kid was ready.
Let's get it on. Want to go now?
Sonny Liston was not a good fighter. Sonny Liston was a great fighter. He was a great fighter. Liston was the ultimate bully.
Well, he was a big, tough thug. That's what he was. And he could punch.
I think that the difference between Cassius Clay and Sonny Liston was like the difference between night and day, the difference between darkness and light. I remember that fight and remembered wondering if Cassius Clay would come out whole. Never occurred to me that he could beat Sonny Liston.
Certain fighters could beat certain fighters. I knew Muhammad could beat 10 Listons. The quickness, the agility. My kid knew he could beat Liston. I knew he could beat. Nobody believed us.
The plan of battle is obvious from the start. The challenger will move to both sides, but primarily clockwise to avoid the champion's best punch.
Liston had a tremendous jab. It was like a tree trunk. If he hit you, you're in deep trouble.
When Liston corners Clay, the challenger plays the ropes. Clay's jab bothers Liston's timing. Clay now sets the pace. That left hook is Clay's best punch up to this point.
This is what my kid did. He leaned over, nailed him with the right hand. That was all stuff we worked on.
This was the combination that split the skin under Liston's left eye.
Liston had been cut. It was a no significant cut. But Liston wasn't used to seeing his own blood. And he sat on that stool, and that was it. He was not coming out.
Liston could not continue. Winner by a TKO in the 7th round, Cassius Clay.
People didn't really look at Liston because we were so busy looking at the court jester. He was running around the ring. I fooled you, and you, and you, and you, and you said I couldn't, and I, blah, 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 blah. And remember something else during this whole tirade. Never said Muslim, never said Nation of Islam, never said Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That comes the next day.
He can't go one round. He might get him in 2. He's pulling his hands back. He holds his hands too low. While I'm still pretty. I want him so bad he had to go to the hospital, and I'm still pretty. What you gonna say about that, huh?
The excitement of winning it, and I felt he could win it, was a tremendous feeling, naturally, because you're part of it. I think the American public found out this kid was for real.
The crowd couldn't hurt him. The crowd couldn't even get a good lick on him to hurt him. Put him in the hospital. He's never been stopped. He's never been whooped. Oh, I'm so grateful.
Oh, it sure shocked the world. That's what he said. I shocked the world. It established his credentials as 1, a boxer, 2, a puncher, and 3, a dancer. I mean, there'd never been a heavyweight like Muhammad Ali.
Do you think it has anything to do with your being a member of the Black Muslims?
No, the Black Muslim is the name you give it and the press give it. We're not Black Muslims. My religion is Islam, which means peace.
The press is constantly trying to paint him as something other than what he actually is. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink. In fact, if he was white, they would be referring to him as the All-American Boy.
Cassius Clay was my slave name. I'm no longer a slave. What does it mean? Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high.
Where did this come from, the title of the Muslims being a hate group?
Well, the press, the anti-Muslim press, tried to paint that distorted image purposely to make most of the Negroes in this country afraid to be identified with it. Cassius destroyed that image the other night when he knocked out Sonny Liston.
There was one thing they didn't have and they desperately wanted. They didn't have a name for the stationery. And when he walked in the next day after he won the title, he was a spokesman.
I'm asking you in a nice way. The world is watching, and I want you to respect it, and I would like for you to call me by my name now. Muhammad Ali.
He didn't want to be Muhammad Ali, first of all, with the name. He wanted to be Cassius X. You know, he took the name because Elijah kind of insisted that he take the name.
I certainly think that the Nation of Islam used Muhammad Ali, but I would definitely say that he was not a puppet. He was the most visible person they had. Until they got Muhammad Ali, it was Malcolm X.
If the government can't defend us, what should we do? If the government doesn't want us to pick up a rifle, then defend us.
Malcolm X at the time was in a political struggle with Elijah Muhammad, basically for control of the Nation of Islam. To drive a wedge between Ali and Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad gave him the honorific name Muhammad Ali.
Theology of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam included references to a race of pale-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed devils and a spacecraft called the Mother of Planes. However, the nation's gospel appealed to Malcolm X and to his ideological protege, Muhammad Ali, not for its mythology, but for the principle of black pride it embraced.
My father was convinced that our people was living under a psychology that depicted themselves and degraded themselves. And they thought that they was less than white people.
The Nation of Islam was a fringe group, considered by most people in a middle-class black community to be not just on the edge, but off the edge.
To gain recruits, to become legitimatized, what's better than to have the most famous man in the world walking around saying, I'm a member of the Nation of Islam?
Ali vehemently and at times violently defended his right to adopt his chosen religion and newly given name. Opponents who called him Clay, refusing to acknowledge him as Ali, endured more than his stinging punches in the ring. They also felt his wrath.
Why do you want to say Cassius Clay when Howard Cosell and everybody is calling you Muhammad Ali? Now why you gotta be the one of all people whose color to keep saying Cassius Clay?
Boastful, loud, arrogant. That was just him.
Why don't you call me my name, man?
Well, what's your name?
My name is Muhammad Ali, and you will announce it right there in the center of that ring after the fight if you don't do it now.
There was no mercy in Ali.
Deliberately doing this.
I think so.
You do? What do you think, George?
I think so. He's just letting him hang on. He's trying to humiliate him like you said he would.
In some of those fights, against Ernie Terrell, against Floyd Patterson, where he taunted them and when he just laid it on them and said, what's my name, what's my name? You know, that sort of, it turned off people who even liked him because there was this cruel streak that at times did run through Ali.
It was not a pretty time in his life. Through the 60s was not the Muhammad Ali that we knew. He was a mean-spirited man who often went out of his way to seem to want to make enemies.
There is no inconsistency in him. Muhammad Ali became many things over the years because that's what Muhammad wanted to become.
Young black Americans were going to Vietnam in disproportionate numbers to the population. Because if you were in college, you could get a deferment. If you had political, economic connections, chance you could use those to get a deferment. If you're poor and black, you had none of that. So you went to Vietnam.
Unlike Korea and unlike Iraq, Vietnam was a black man's war. And the people who would have had to fight that war, they knew where they stood. And to them, he was the guy. He rocked the sport until the draft came up. Then he rocked the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
No, I will not go 10,000 miles from here to help murder and kill another poor people simply to continue the domination of white slave masters over the darker people of the earth.
I don't believe it was ever Ali's thought to refuse to serve in the U.S. Army. I believe it was Elijah Muhammad's thought, Elijah Muhammad's order to his underling, Muhammad Ali, that you will not serve.
If you were a member of the Nation of Islam, you followed Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
whatever the punishment, whatever the persecution is for standing up for my religious beliefs, even if it means facing machine gun fire that day, I will face it before denouncing Elijah Muhammad and the religion of Islam. I'm ready to die.
My father himself has spent time in jail for not going to the army. My older brothers, they had spent time for not going to the army. So he feels that he couldn't do no less than say, I'm not going either.
The last person who had said no to Elijah Muhammad was Malcolm X.
Consequently, Malcolm X was assassinated by the Nation of Islam.
Ali was never a tool of anybody. Ali did what he wanted to do.
Why he said no didn't matter. When he said no didn't matter. Did somebody order him to say no? That didn't matter. All that mattered was that he paid the price.
He denounced the war before Martin Luther King did.
He was opposed to the role of this government. And he was willing to stand up and take whatever consequences. And the consequences for him were devastating.
Immediately, his license was suspended. He couldn't fight anywhere. His passport was taken up. He couldn't leave the country.
He was wonderful because he could be anything that your mind chose to make him. If you were against the Vietnam War, Muhammad Ali. If you were for the Vietnam War, you can't let this son of a bitch do this.
He was one of the most hated men in America, and mostly by white America.
How do you think the national security, whatever it was you said would be, if every boy decided to run to Canada like all the white boys are doing? I haven't left the country. I'm just one man out of thousands of whites who are doing worse than I have ever done. And I'm only doing it legally.
If you can show me how my going to Vietnam will help 12 million of my people, you wouldn't have to draft me. I'd go tomorrow morning.
He gave voice to black Americans' belief that they were important, that they were somebody.
I can't recognize the fact that it's color when my head is busted, and here I am, the heavyweight champ of the whole world, and I see Joe Namath with a bad knee. He got out of the army, and every time I look up, he's throwing touchdowns. I can't help him saying it's color. Don't get on me. I'm a victim of circumstances.
No black man had ever dared say that out loud. And yet here was the most famous black man in America saying it out loud and refusing, absolutely refusing to ever shut up.
Your religion tells you not to kill, but you will kill. Because what? Because you're giving up what your religion teach you. I'm not giving up my God for no government.
I think Ali came along at a time of revolutionary change in this country. Prior to that period, there was a sense of the government was right, and people rarely spoke out in force against the government. But there was a growing anti-war movement in this country, and to a lot of people in this country, Muhammad Ali was a hero.
Everything good and of authority was made white. We look at Jesus, we see a white with blonde hair and blue eyes. Now I'm sure if there's a heaven in the sky and the colored folks die and go to heaven, and where are the colored angels? They must be in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. I took my step back because I am a Muslim. There are 750 million more that believe just like me. Why are we called Negroes? Chinese are named after China. Cubans are named after Cuba. Russians are named after Russia. I'm not saying it. And we slaved and died. And we fought in all the wars. And we still fighting in them. And still a nigger. What country is named Negroes? I'm not burning no draft cards. I still have it. I'm not laying on the Pentagon steps. I'm not hanging statues of Lyndon Johnson. I'm not burning American flags. I'm only following the law.
His title stripped, his stage gone, the outlet for his art form taken, Ali the man replaced Ali the boxer. In speeches on college campuses around the country, he still danced, but with words. He still jabbed, but at the government. He still floated, he still stung, he still performed, but as philosopher on the pulpit, not as fighter in the ring.
It was no longer the athletic Ali that mattered. Now it was an Ali that was on a world stage. It was an Ali that was preaching. It was an Ali that was doing now what he saw Dr. King do. It was an Ali that had a platform and was willing to go out there and make it real.
During the exile at Jersey City State, he's talking and somebody shouts from the balcony, "I'll take your place in the Army for $1,000. And he yells back to the guy, "No, brother, your life's worth a lot more than $1,000.
I am bigger than boxers. I am bigger than all the champions put together. I'm bigger than the Super Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Kentucky Derby, the National 500. When I go, the world, truly, the world listens."
When Ali said no to the war, he became a symbol for those people who weren't interested in boxing but were opposed to the war, who weren't interested in a fighter but were opposed to the method, and some would say the madness, of this government.
It has been said that I have two alternatives. Either go to jail or go to the Army.
Ali, at least 7 times, was one legal decision away from going to prison for 5 years, and he would have done it.
But I would like to say that there is another alternative, and that alternative is justice.
He gave up almost 3 years of his prime. Why would he do that if it was for no other reason than his philosophy that he believed in?
He faced 2 legal battles, to regain the right to fight and to overturn his conviction on draft evasion. In Georgia, where there was no state athletic commission, local Atlanta politicians green-lighted a bout in 1970. His first fight in over 3.5 years ended with a 3rd-round TKO of Jerry Quarry. 6 weeks later, a federal judge in New York ordered the state to restore Ali's license. At Madison Square Garden, Oscar Bonavena pushed Ali to the limit before succumbing in the 15th round. These were the first fights after a long layoff. But even accounting for ring rust, it was clear that Ali was no longer the untouchable fighter he had been before.
The Ali that came back was slower. He had lost a lot of his reflexes, but what he proved was that he was still the smartest guy in the ring, and he had a hell of a chin.
The Ali that you saw at any stage of the game was a great fighter. The Ali you saw as a kid matured into what a great fighter's supposed to be.
He wasn't quite as fast, but he was still better than anybody except Joe Frazier.
Before you hit it, punch in the body. That's it. Damn, get out of there, man.
Frazier was a great fighter. Ali was a great fighter. We didn't know which was the greatest fighter. You know, Ali had been away for almost 4 years. In the meantime, Frazier had risen to the championship, at least given the championship. And Ali, we shouldn't forget, had become bigger than boxing. So suddenly he's back.
The styles were perfect. I mean, you had this one great boxer and this other great warrior who just didn't know anything but yet to come right at you. You could not escape from Joe Frazier.
The photographer at the fight was Frank Sinatra. Burt Lancaster was part of the broadcast team. Everybody who was anybody wanted to be there.
This was a great show. It's the biggest boxing spectacle. We've never had anything like it since or before.
This was to be more than a boxing match. It would be a celestial event, a collision of opposing forces made more distinct by Ali himself. He capitalized on the incendiary tenor of the times to promote the fight of the century.
Everything stopped. Everything stopped. There was headlines in every paper. And it also became a clash of the cultures because people of a certain political persuasion, we call them conservatives now, I guess, they embraced Frazier. And the liberals and the black people were all for Ali.
Ali created that polarization just by his press conferences. Everything he said leading up to the fight was designed to create this division of people. Either you're for me or you're against me. And if you're a black person, you're for me. Only white people, only the Ku Klux Klan, he even said at one point, is for Joe Frazier.
Joe Frazier would have beat an awful lot of fighters. The only guy out there would have licked Joe was my guy, style-wise. Box, move, speed. And then my guy, if he kept him in the middle, there would have been no contest. That shot that he got hit would knock out anybody, but he got up.
The winner by unanimous decision and still heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Frazier.
One time in my life, I didn't know what to write, and it was that night, because I had no idea that Muhammad Ali could lose. When the decision was announced, I was stunned.
He lost that fight. He really lost that fight. That left hook that put him down sealed it.
As you see my face, there's one bruise here because of some awkward punches. But if you look at me, out of that rough fight with Joe Frazier, you notice you don't see one scratch. If you just hide the bump, hide the bruise here, you see not one thing happen in that fight.
He found in Joe Frazier a perfect foil, the tireless foe who forced Ali to the outer reaches of his skill and stamina. But as fate would have it, Ali could not regain the heavyweight title by fighting Frazier again. For that, he'd have to travel as far from Louisville as he'd ever been, on a long journey home.
When we got to Zaire, Africa, it was late at night and we got off the airplane. And you hear everybody yelling, Ali, Ali. And he turned to me and he said, who don't they like here? I said, I guess white people. He said, well, how could I tell them George Foreman's white? You're here with me and Angela. So I said, the Belgians. And he puts his hands in the air. George Foreman's of Belgium. And they start yelling, Ali Boumaier, Ali Boumaier. So I turned to our interpreter and I said, Galinga, what is that? He said, that means Ali, kill him. And then the Belgians used to put the dogs on the people in Africa. The Belgians controlled it. And here comes George Foreman off the airplane with a big German Shepherd dog. I said, we're home free.
The fighters earned more money, traveled a greater distance, and brought along bigger entourages than for any other fight in history. But the rumble in the jungle was above all else a testament to Ali's transcendence, beyond boxing, beyond borders. He was beloved around the world as athlete, activist, showman, and conqueror, especially in the land from which his ancestors had been taken in chains.
The king is going home to reclaim his crown.
I knew when we got there that our kid would be the favorite because they adopted him right away. George Foreman was the enemy.
Ali had charmed Zaire, and I'm sure he charmed all of Africa. I doubt if there was anybody outside of George Foreman's immediate family who really wanted George Foreman to win.
But the prevailing sentiment among the experts was that Foreman would not only win, he would destroy Ali. As a pro, Foreman bludgeoned his way through the ranks with devastating knockouts of Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, the only two men who had beaten Ali. And Foreman, who projected a surly and private persona back then, was ominous and all business as he prepared for the fight.
Everybody had such fear going into that fight that Ali would seriously be hurt by the monster Foreman.
George Foreman looked invincible. There is no way that any fighter, even Ali, could have been watching Foreman train and hitting that heavy bag and thinking, what have I gotten myself into?
Muhammad Ali never had any fear. They had a press conference in New York City. Muhammad Ali and I and Jack Dempsey was talking, and in comes George Foreman, and he stopped, and he's staring at him. And Ali said, "Excuse me, Mr. Dempsey." And he went right up to George Foreman's face. He said, "You staring at me, I'll whip your butt right here. Who do you think? I'm scared of you? I ain't scared of you. Sonny Liston did that when he was a little boy. I'll whip your butt right here." And Foreman started looking down and he said, "Do you hear me, boy? I'm talking to you." And Foreman looked down and walked away, and Ali came right back. "Excuse me, Mr. Dempsey, I just won round one."
Angelo Dundee screaming from the corner, "Ali, get off those ropes." But Ali continues to talk to Foreman.
The corner was shouting at him to get off the ropes. I think that when people suggest that rope-a-dope was deeply premeditated, they're actually insulting or belittling what Ali did, because it was a marvelous, spontaneous solution to a very serious problem.
I hit him in the butt, for God's sake, when he was around my corner. I smacked him. Get the heck out of there. Stay in the middle. Get away from there. I know what I'm doing. It was his innovation, not mine.
George hit him with some horrendous shots. Ali looked at him and said, "Is that all you got?" And he kept working on George's ego, his mind, and it worked.
Ali has tremendous look of confidence on that face. These punches are landing, bouncing off the eye of the heavyweight champion of the world, George Foreman. Foreman has his work cut out for him.
The one thing I'm assured of, I hurt him as much as I've hurt anybody else I've boxed, but I'd never fought anyone with that kind of determination.
Oh, great left hand taken on the face of George Foreman.
The first time Muhammad Ali brought in the rope-a-dope, it was like, yo, everybody's saying, you know, what is this guy doing? What is he doing? It may look like he's getting punched, but his defense is up. He's just saving energy. He's allowing the other guy to punch himself out. And then he seizes that moment and knocks him out. Unbelievable.
Ali, a sneaky right hand. Another sneaky right hand. This time he worked over the shoulder of Foreman.
What he did was more than courageous. It was a step beyond. It was like he was sacrificing himself. You could see a fella saying, if I fall, people fall with me. Muhammad Ali was thinking, I cannot let people fall tonight.
The Foreman fight really changed everything. It changed everybody's perception of him and everything else. Beating Foreman, that's what made him a hero.
It was more than a sporting event. It was a triumph over an unfair persecution of him. It was politics of the Vietnam War, the culture of an African-American winning in Africa. It was an epic moment because it meant so much on so many different levels.
In a perfect world, perhaps he would have stopped there, his title regained, his legend confirmed. Instead, he held on too long, wanting to please, daring to dream to the end. Were it not for the fact that he's lived it for 65 years, his life would seem an allegory, a folktale, to be told around dinner tables, in classrooms, as a bedtime story about how one man shook up the world by throwing punches and remaining true to his principles.
That's part of the legacy of Muhammad Ali. He refused to separate
his role and responsibility as a citizen of the world from all of the riches that this society was giving him for his athletic talent. Why have the profile if you're not going to do something positive with it?
There's so much money being made today that most athletes aren't going to jeopardize all the money they can make.
Muhammad Ali never cared about money. He cared about principle, he cared about things he believed in. And today, it's an easy thing to say, but I'm afraid it's true, that nobody believes in anything.
What you speak out comes from what's within. You don't have athletes that have the core beliefs and values and sense of sacrifice Ali had.
If he was healthy today and young, and they called him for the draft to go to Iraq, he would say the same thing today. Every day he transcends his life, and his life is going around and round again.
I look at Ali now, and I see a man who's quiet, but he has a twinkle in his eye, as if it ain't so bad being quiet. He's not obliged to mouth off anymore. And I think he maybe enjoy being quiet more than we think. He said it. He said it. Why should he say it again?
It's August 18th, 1960. Cassius Clay of the